Indian billionaire goes to buy sweets for his fiancée at the fair. But when he meets the sweet seller, his heart beats faster. Welcome to Billionaires and Hearts. Before we dive into today's emotional journey, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to stay updated. We'd love to hear your first impressions, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think as you watch. And if you enjoy our stories, please like and share this video with your friends. Now let's get started. The bustling Diwali fair in Mumbai hummed with life as Ishaan Bajaj stepped out of his sleek black Bentley. Despite the luxury that surrounded him daily, something about the vibrant chaos of the street fair called to him. Clothed in a meticulously tailored navy blue kurta with gold embroidery, Ishaan stood out even among the festively dressed crowd. His strong jawline and deep contemplative eyes had graced many business magazines, but today he wasn't Ishaan Bajaj, the heir to the Bajaj Industries empire. Today he was simply a man searching for sweets for his fiancée. The arranged match with Deepika Singhania had been celebrated as the union of two powerful business families. The engagement ceremony had been lavish, their pictures splashed across social media. Yet as their wedding day approached, Ishaan felt a strange emptiness he couldn't explain to anyone. Not to his authoritative father, not to his childhood friends, and certainly not to Deepika herself. Just traditional jalebi and barfi, he told his driver and bodyguard Rahul. Wait here, I want to explore the fair alone. Rahul looked concerned. Sir, your father would not approve. My father is not here, Ishaan replied with a firm smile. 30 minutes, that's all. The fair was a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds and scents. Children ran with sparklers, while elders bargained at stalls selling everything from handcrafted diyas to brilliantly colored saris. Ishaan moved through the crowd, enjoying the rare anonymity. Following the sweet aroma of sugar and ghee, he made his way to a row of food stalls. And then he saw her. Behind a modest stall decorated with marigold garlands and twinkling fairy lights stood a young woman in a simple yet vibrant crimson salwar kameez. Her hands moved with practiced grace as she dipped jalebis into sizzling oil, creating perfect spirals before transferring them to syrup. What struck Ishaan most was not just her beauty, though with her large expressive eyes and delicate features framed by a loosely draped dupatta, she was undeniably beautiful, but the quiet joy that radiated from her as she worked. The best jalebis in all of Mumbai, she called out, her voice melodious against the backdrop of the fair. Made with my grandmother. Secret recipe. Ishaan found himself drawn to her stall. Are they really the best? He asked, a genuine smile forming on his lips. She looked up and for a moment time seemed to still. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. He was used to that, but instead of the usual deference or calculation he typically saw, there was something disarmingly direct in her gaze. I would not claim it if it wasn't true, she replied with quiet confidence, but you should judge for yourself. She handed him a small piece of jalebi on a leaf plate. The sweet was still warm, perfectly crisp on the outside and soaked with saffron-scented syrup. Ishaan took a bite, and the flavor transported him back to childhood visits to his grandmother's village home, to simpler times before business empires and board meetings. This is... He paused, searching for the right words. Just jalebi, she said with a smile that transformed her face, creating dimples on her cheeks. But made with care. Daismi Chandani said, forgetting for a moment that his name often created a stir. I know who you are, Mr. Bajaj, she replied. Your picture was in the newspaper last week, the engagement announcement. A pang of something like guilt hit him, though he had done nothing wrong. And you are? Nandini, she said. Nandini Sharma. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion several stalls away. A group of local thugs were harassing an elderly vendor, knocking over his display of handcrafted pottery. Not again, Nandini muttered, her expression darkening. Excuse me. Before Ishaan could say anything, she was moving toward the disturbance with purpose. He followed, curious and concerned. Vikram, she called out to the leader, a burly man with a scar across his cheek. We have discussed this. The market committee won't tolerate your harassment anymore. Vikram turned, his expression changing from menace to something more complicated when he saw Nandini. The old man owes protection money. Business is business, Nandini. "This isn't tea business. It is bullying," she replied, helping the elderly vendor steady his stall. "And the police station is just around the corner." Ishaan noticed how several other vendors had moved closer, standing behind Nandini in silent support. The atmosphere was tense until Vikram finally backed away with a dismissive gesture. "This isn't tea over," he muttered, giving Ishaan a curious glance before departing with his followers. "Are you all right, uncle?" Nandini asked the elderly vendor, who nodded gratefully. "Thanks to you, Betty, always standing up for us." As they walked back to her stall, Ishaan couldn't contain his admiration. "That was brave. Do you often confront local gangsters?" Nandini shrugged. "Someone has to. The fair vendors elected me to the market committee last year. Many of them have been paying protection for too long." "Aren't you afraid?" "Of course," she admitted, returning to her work. "But fear doesn't help anyone, does it?" Ishaan watched as she expertly prepared a large order for another customer, noting the worn but clean appearance of her stall, the faded photographs of what must be family recipes pinned to one side. There was a dignity in how she conducted herself that many people he knew with far more wealth completely lacked. "So, Mr. Bajaj," she said, after finishing with the customer, "how many jalebi would you like to buy for your fiancée?" The reminder of his purpose jarred him. 2 kilos, please, and some barfi as well." As she packaged the sweets in simple boxes lined with banana leaves, Ishaan found himself asking, "How long have you been selling sweets?" "Sign all my life," she replied. "My father started this stall, and before him my grandfather. Our family has been making sweets for 3 generations. "You must have studied as well?" he asked, sensing an intelligence and awareness in her that suggested education. A shadow passed over her features. "I was halfway through my business degree when my father fell ill. The medical bills." She trailed off, then brightened. "But the sweet stall supported us, and now I am taking evening classes to finish my education." She handed him the packages, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Your fiancé is fortunate. These sweets bring happiness to any celebration." Ishaan paid, leaving far more than the asking price. Nandini immediately tried to return the excess. "I cannot accept this," she said firmly. "Consider it a donation to the market committee," he replied, "for protection against protection rackets." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll make sure it helps the vendors, thank you." As Ishaan turned to leave, something made him pause. "The fair runs for 10 days, yes? For Diwali?" "Yes," Nandini confirmed. "We are here every evening until the final night of celebrations." "Then perhaps I'll return," he said, the words coming out before he could consider their implication. "To try the other sweets." Her smile was polite but reserved. "You're welcome any time, Mr. Bajaj. The sweets will be waiting." As Ishaan walked back to his car, the packages of jalebis and barfi warm in his hands, he knew that something had shifted in his carefully ordered world. He had come for sweets but found something else entirely, a glimpse of authenticity in Nandini Sharma's determined eyes and gentle smile that made his heart beat with unfamiliar rhythm. What he did not notice was Vikram watching from the shadows, his gaze calculating as it followed Ishaan to his expensive car, then turned back toward Nandini, as modest, sweet stall with newfound interest. That night, as Ishaan presented the sweets to Deepika at her family AS mansion, her pleased but distracted response felt hollow. While she exclaimed over the perfect texture of the jalebis, his mind wandered back to the fair, to Nandini's hands creating those perfect spirals, to her courage facing down Vikram, to the dimples that appeared when she truly smiled. "Is everything all right, Ishaan?" Deepika asked, noticing his distraction. "Of course," he replied automatically. "Just thinking about a business matter." But as he drove home through Mumbai's glittering nightscape, Ishaan knew that what preoccupied him was not business at all. And he also knew, with growing certainty, that he would return to the Diwali fair tomorrow, and the day after, drawn back to a simple, sweet stall and the extraordinary woman who ran it. The early evening sky blazed with hues of orange and pink as Ishaan returned to the Diwali fair the following day. He had abandoned his usual formal attire for a simpler kurta, hoping to blend in more with the crowd. Still, heads turned as he made his way through the bustling marketplace. There was something in his bearing that wealth and privilege had ingrained too deeply to disguise completely. His heart quickened as he approached Nandini's stall. Today she wore a peacock blue salwar kameez with silver embroidery that caught the light of the lanterns hanging above. Her hair was braided with jasmine flowers, their sweet scent mixing with the aroma of simmering syrup and freshly fried sweets. "Mr. Bajaj," she said, surprise evident in her voice when she spotted him. "You returned." "Ishaan," he corrected her. "Please call me Ishaan." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Ishaan, then. Did your fiancée enjoy the sweets?" "She did," he replied, feeling a twinge of guilt at the mention of Deepika. "But I discovered I have a personal preference for jalebis that I never knew about before yesterday." "Is that so?" Nandini's eyes sparkled with amusement as she handed a package to another customer. "Well, we have more than just jalebis. Would you like to try our kaju katli today? It is made with cashews and silver vark." As she spoke, Ishaan noticed a small bandage on her wrist that hadn't been there yesterday. "You re-hurt," he said, his tone shifting to concern. Nandini quickly adjusted her sleeve to cover it. "It is nothing, just a small burn from the hot oil. Occupational hazard when you make sweets all day." But something in her averted gaze made Ishaan suspect there was more to the story. Before he could inquire further, an elderly woman approached the stall, her face lighting up when she saw Nandini. "Nani!" Nandini exclaimed with genuine delight, coming around from behind the counter to embrace her grandmother. "I didn't expect you today. How could I miss seeing my granddaughter during Diwali?" the older woman replied, her eyes crinkling with affection. She turned to Ishaan, assessing him with shrewd eyes. "And who might this young man be?" "This is a customer, Nani. Mr. Bajaj, Ishaan." "Bajaj?" The older woman, his eyebrows rose. "From the big industrial family?" Ishaan touched his palms together in a respectful namaste. "Yes, Auntie. It is a pleasure to meet you." She murmured, studying him. "Well, any customer of my Nandini's sweets has good taste. She uses my recipes, you know. 3 generations of sweet makers in our family." "Your granddaughter mentioned that," Ishaan smiled. "She clearly inherited your talent." Nandini's grandmother beamed with pride, then turned serious. "Nandini, I came to tell you that Vikram and his men were asking questions at the temple about you this morning, after what happened yesterday." "Nani, please," Nandini cut in with a quick glance at Ishaan. "It is nothing to worry about. Vikram is all talk." But Ishaan had heard enough to make the connection. "The bandage," he said quietly. "It wasn't tea from cooking, was it? Did Vikram hurt you after I left yesterday?" A tense silence fell over the 3 of them. Finally, Nandini sighed. "He grabbed my wrist when I was closing the stall, said I should be careful about who I make friends with." She straightened her shoulders. "But I've dealt with his type before. The market committee is meeting tomorrow to discuss hiring proper security." Ishaan felt a surge of anger. "This is unacceptable. Have you reported him to the police?" Nandini's laugh held no humor. "The local inspector gets monthly payments from Vikram. Besides, it would only make things worse. We handle our problems our own way here." Her grandmother nodded sagely. "Our community looks after its own, but," she added with a worried glance at her granddaughter, "these men are getting bolder, ever since that new construction company started buying up property in the area." "Royal Constructions?" Ishaan asked, his business instincts suddenly alert. Both women looked at him in surprise. "Yes," Nandini confirmed. "How did you know?" "They are a subsidiary of MNS Holdings," Ishaan explained. "They have been aggressive in developing several areas in Mumbai." What he didn't add was that Bajaj Industries had recently been approached by MNS Holdings for a potential partnership. The meeting was scheduled for next week, a meeting his father expected him to attend with Deepika's father, cementing both their business and familial alliances. The implications were becoming clear. Vikram and his thugs were likely pressuring local businesses and residents to sell their properties cheaply to make way for new development. "I see you know your real estate companies well," Nandini remarked, a new wariness in her expression. Before Ishaan could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of several customers. Nandini's grandmother gave him one last appraising look before moving to help her granddaughter. Ishaan stepped back, watching them work together with practiced coordination. Despite the concern gnawing at him, he couldn't help but admire Nandini's grace and efficiency, the genuine way she interacted with each customer, remembering their preferences and asking about their families. When the rush subsided, Nandini approached him with a small box. "Your Kaju Katli," she said, "on the house." "I can't accept that," he protested. "I consider it a thank you for your donation to the market committee yesterday," she insisted. "We were using it to hire security guards for the remaining days of the fair." Ishaan accepted the box, their fingers brushing momentarily. "May I ask you something, Nandini?" She tilted her head curiously. "Of course. Would you show me around the fair?" The request surprised even him. "I've lived in Mumbai all my life, but I've never really experienced a community celebration like this." Nandini hesitated, looking back at her stall. Her grandmother waved her hand dismissively. Go. I can manage for an hour. You work too hard anyway, Betty." "Well," Nandini said with a small smile, "I suppose I could give you the local tour, but only for a little while." As they walked through the fair together, Ishaan saw it through new eyes. Nandini knew everyone, stopping to chat with artisans about their craft, introducing Ishaan as a friend interested in our traditions. She showed him where the best pottery was made, where the most skilled Mehendi artists worked, and which stalls had been run by the same families for generations. "You love this place," Ishaan observed as they paused by a display of handcrafted diyas. "It is my home," she said simply. "These people, this market, it is not just business. It is our heritage, and it is worth fighting for," he added, understanding her determination a little better now. "Always." She met his eyes with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Some things are beyond price, Ishaan. Some things you protect, not because they re valuable, but because they re-yours." The conversation shifted to their backgrounds. Ishaan spoke honestly about the expectations that came with his family name, the pressure of an arranged marriage to unite two business empires. Nandini listened without judgment, offering insights that showed her remarkable perception. "And what about you?" he asked as they shared a plate of golgappas from a street vendor. "What dreams did you have before responsibility called you back to the sweet stall?" Nandini wiped her hands on a napkin, considering. "I wanted to start a culinary school, not for fancy chefs but for street food vendors and home cooks who have incredible recipes passed down through generations, to preserve those traditions and help people make a living from them." "That is a beautiful vision," Ishaan said, genuinely impressed. "Why not still pursue it?" "Someday, perhaps." Her smile held both hope and resignation. "For now, there's the stall, my evening classes, and keeping Vikram and his friends from bullying our vendors." As the evening progressed, they found themselves sitting on a bench slightly removed from the fair's hustle, watching children play with sparklers. In the distance, temple bells rang for evening aarti. "Thank you," Ishaan said quietly. "This has been illuminating." "The fair is special during Diwali," Nandini agreed, misunderstanding. "I meant spending time with you." He turned to face her, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. "You've shown me a side of Mumbai I never knew existed, despite living here all my life." The lantern light caught the gold flecks in her dark eyes as she looked at him. For a moment the noise of the fair faded away, and there was only this connection between them, unexpected, unplanned, and undeniable. "Nandini!" The sharp call broke the moment. A young man hurried toward them, his expression urgent. "You need to come quickly. Vikram and his men are at your stall arguing with your grandmother." They rushed back through the crowd. From a distance, Ishaan could see several men looming over Nandini's stall, while her elderly grandmother stood her ground, arms crossed defiantly. "All we were saying is that you should consider the offer," Vikram was saying as they approached. "The area is changing. Smart people sell now and get good money." "This stall has been in our family for generations," the old woman replied firmly. "We are not selling to anyone, especially not to property developers who send thugs to do their negotiating." Vikram's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, old woman." "Enough!" Nandini's voice cut through the tension as she pushed forward. "Leave our stall now, Vikram." The man turned, his scarred face twisting into an unpleasant smile when he saw her. "Ah, there you are. Been enjoying the fair with your new wealthy friend?" His gaze slid to Ishaan, assessment and calculation in his eyes. "Interesting company you be keeping these days." Ishaan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Nandini. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Vikram replied, his casual tone belied by the tension in his posture. "Just business talk. Seems your family's business partners are interested in this area. Thought you might know something about that." The implication was clear, and Ishaan felt a chill. How did Vikram know about the potential partnership between Bajaj Industries and M&S Holdings? The information wasn't public yet. "I think you should leave," Ishaan said, his voice low but carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. A crowd had begun to gather around them, vendors and fairgoers alike watching the confrontation with concern. Vikram glanced around, noting the numbers, and apparently decided this wasn't the time for escalation. "We'll continue this conversation later," he said to Nandini, then addressed Ishaan directly. "Enjoy the fair, Mr. Bajaj. I hear it might be the last one in this location. Progress, you know." As Vikram and his men sauntered away, the tension slowly dissipated. Nandini immediately went to her grandmother, checking that she was unharmed. "I am fine, Betty," the older woman assured her, "though I didn't like the way they getting bolder. And how did they know about his family's business?" She nodded toward Ishaan. The same question troubled Ishaan. The coincidence seemed too convenient. Either Vikram had sources inside the corporate world, or... His phone buzzed with a message. It was from his father. "Where are you?" "Deepika Hayas' family is here for dinner. We're waiting." Reality crashed back. Ishaan had completely forgotten about the dinner his parents had arranged with his fiancée Hayas' family to discuss wedding preparations. "I have to go," he said, the strain evident in his voice. "I'm sorry about all this. About Vikram mentioning my family's business." Nandini's expression had closed off, the warmth of their earlier conversation replaced by a careful neutrality. "You should go then, your fiancé is waiting." The reminder stung more than it should have. "Nandini, this situation with Vikram and the developers, I had no idea. But now that I do, perhaps I can help." "Help?" There was a new edge to her voice. "How exactly?" "By ensuring your family's business partner gives us a fair price when they force us out of our homes and livelihoods." "That is not what I meant." "What did you mean then?" Her eyes flashed with a mixture of hurt and anger. "Was this tour just corporate reconnaissance? See what the area has to offer before your family's company helps demolish it?" "No," Ishaan was genuinely shocked by the accusation. "I would never." "You should go to your dinner, Mr. Bajaj," she said, the formality a clear dismissal. "Thank you for your patronage at our humble stall." With that she turned away, guiding her grandmother back behind the counter and beginning to serve waiting customers as if nothing had happened. But Ishaan could see the stiffness in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as she worked. He wanted to stay to explain, but his phone buzzed again with increasingly urgent messages. With a heavy heart, he left the fair, the box of Kaju Katli still clutched in his hand. A sweet reminder of a connection that had blossomed and withered in the span of a single evening. As his driver navigated through Mumbai's traffic toward his family's mansion, Ishaan stared at the city lights reflecting on the sea. Two worlds had collided today, and he found himself caught between them, between duty and desire, between the path laid out for him and the one his heart yearned to explore. The dinner that night was a blur of polite conversation and wedding plans that now felt hollow. Deepika, elegant in a designer anarkali, spoke animatedly about venues and guest lists while their fathers discussed the upcoming business meeting with M&S Holdings. "The acquisition of that old market area will complete our development plan for the Eastern Corridor," Deepika's father was saying, "though I hear there's some resistance from local vendors." "Nothing that can't be handled," Ishaan's father replied dismissively. "Progress always faces resistance from those who can see the bigger picture." Ishaan thought of Nandini's words. "Some things are beyond price. Some things you protect not because they were valuable, but because they were yours." "Ishaan." Deepika's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You have been so quiet. Is everything all right?" He looked at his fiancée, beautiful, accomplished, and a perfect match on paper. Yet sitting across from her, all he could see was Nandini's face in the lantern light, the passion in her eyes when she spoke of her community, the gentle strength with which she faced adversity. "I'm fine," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about some business matters." But as the evening wore on, Ishaan knew he was not fine. The box of Kaju Katli sat in his car, a sweet reminder of a bitter truth. He was part of the very system threatening to destroy what Nandini held dear. And despite knowing her for just 2 days, the thought of causing her pain was suddenly unbearable. That night, unable to sleep, Ishaan made a decision. He would not be a passive participant in this game any longer. Whatever happened next, with the business deal, with his engagement with Nandini, he would face it with open eyes and an honest heart. What he did not know was that at that very moment, Vikram was meeting with representatives from M&S Holdings in a private room above a restaurant not far from the fair, and the photograph being examined on the table was of Ishaan and Nandini walking together through the Diwali fair, her face animated as she showed him her world, a world now marked for demolition. Dawn broke over Mumbai, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ishaan stood at the window of his office, watching the city awaken. He had barely slept, his mind consumed by thoughts of Nandini, the market, and the impossible situation before him. On his desk lay the project files for the M&S Holdings development, documents he had requested from his father's secretary first thing this morning. The plans were impressive. A luxury shopping complex, high-end apartments, and corporate offices that would revitalize an underutilized area of the city. The economic benefits were undeniable. Jobs would be created, tax revenue would increase, and Bajaj Industries would profit handsomely. But at what cost? The knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, turning from the window. Rahul, his driver and most trusted employee, entered with a file. "Sir, I've gathered the information you requested about the Diwali market area and its vendors." "Thank you, Rahul." Ishaan took the file, opening it to find photographs, documents, and detailed notes. "This is impressive work in such a short time." "The market has a rich history, sir," Rahul said. "Many of those stalls have been operated by the same families for generations. The sweet stall you visited, the one run by Ms. Sharma, it is one of the oldest. Her grandfather was given that spot by the temple committee for making sweets for religious ceremonies." Ishaan nodded, examining a photograph of a much younger Nandini standing proudly with her father in front of their stall. Her smile was the same, genuine, lighting up her entire face. "And what about Vikram? What did you learn about him?" Rahul's expression darkened. "He works for a local politician with interests in the development project. His job is to persuade reluctant sellers. There have been incidents, fires, vandalism, threats, wherever this group operates. Nothing that can be traced back to them directly, of course." The pieces were falling into place. "And M&S Holdings? What is their connection to this politician?" "Campaign donations, sir. Substantial ones." Ishaan closed the file, his decision crystallizing. "Thank you, Rahul. I need you to arrange a meeting for me." "With whom, sir?" "First, with my father, and then," Ishaan added, his voice firm, "with Deepika. There are some truths that can no longer wait." The confrontation with his father went as expected, a storm of disbelief, disappointment, and dire predictions. "Have you lost your mind?" Rajiv Bajaj thundered, pacing the expansive office. "This partnership with M&S Holdings has been in negotiation for months. Your marriage to Deepika is the cornerstone of our family's alliance, and now, days before the contract signing, you want to back out because of some street vendor." Ishaan remained calm. "This isn't just about Nandini, father. It is about right and wrong. The methods M&S is using to acquire that land are unethical, possibly illegal. If we partner with them, we become complicit. Our business is business, Ishaan. Progress requires sacrifice." "Not like this," Ishaan insisted. "Not by destroying lives and livelihoods. Not by erasing heritage and community. There are other ways to develop that area, ways that preserve its character and support the people who've made it what it is. His father scoffed. Idealistic nonsense. You've spent too much time with these people. They've filled your head with romantic notions about tradition and heritage. The reality is that land is valuable, and its current use is inefficient. I've spent exactly enough time with these people to see what you and I have forgotten, Father, that our wealth comes with responsibility. That business should serve people, not destroy them. Ishaan Bajaj studied his son, his anger giving way to calculation. So what do you propose? That we simply walk away from a lucrative partnership? That you break your engagement to the daughter of one of Mumbai's most influential families, all for a principle? No, Ishaan replied. I propose we be better. I've spent the morning developing an alternative plan. He handed his father a folder. A development that incorporates the existing market, modernizes the infrastructure while preserving its character, and offers the current vendors priority spaces at subsidized rents. His father flipped through the preliminary designs with a skeptical expression. This would be more expensive, more complicated, and more sustainable, more ethical, and ultimately better for our reputation and brand. Imagine the headlines. Bajaj Industries preserves historic market while modernizing infrastructure, versus Bajaj Industries displaces generations of local vendors for profit. A long silence stretched between them as Rajiv considered his son's words. Finally, he closed the folder. I'll look at this proposal more carefully. That is all I can promise for now. It wasn't a victory, but it was a beginning. Thank you, Father. As Ishaan turned to leave, his father called after him. And Deepika? What do you plan to tell her? Ishaan paused at the door. The truth. She deserves that much. Meeting Deepika proved to be more difficult than confronting his father. They sat in the garden of her family's estate, surrounded by meticulously manicured flowers and the gentle sound of a fountain, a setting too perfect for the imperfect conversation they were about to have. You've been different these past few days, Deepika said, elegant in a pale pink churidar kameez. Distant. Is it work pressure? Or is there something else? Ishaan took a deep breath. Deepika, we've known each other since childhood. Our families have been friends and business partners for decades. The match between us makes perfect sense on paper. But, she prompted, her intelligent eyes already understanding where this was leading, but marriage should be more than a business arrangement. You deserve someone who loves you completely, whose heart is fully yours. And your heart isn't tea, she stated simply. I care for you deeply as a friend. I respect you immensely. But you've met someone else, in Deepika finished for him. There was no accusation in her voice, just a quiet resignation. I have, Ishaan admitted. Though that is not the only reason. Even before meeting her, I felt that something was missing between us. We've been going through the motions, fulfilling expectations, but never asking if this is what we truly want. Deepika was silent for a long moment, gazing at the fountain. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. Do you know what I wanted to be before our engagement was arranged? A documentary filmmaker. I studied film briefly in London before my father insisted I focus on business administration. Ishaan stared at her, genuinely surprised. I had no idea. Because we never really talk about our dreams or passions. We discuss business, social events, our families, expectations, but never what makes our hearts beat faster. She turned to him with a sad smile. I envy you, Ishaan. You found the courage to choose your own path. You could still pursue filmmaking, he suggested. Deepika laughed softly. Perhaps, though my father might have a heart attack. Her expression grew serious again. Is she worth it? This woman who has captured your heart? She is remarkable, Ishaan said honestly. Strong, principled, dedicated to her community. But it is not just about her. It's about living authentically, making choices I can be proud of. I understand, Deepika said, and he could see that she truly did. So what happens now? I need to apologize to you and your family for breaking our engagement. The business partnership between our families can still proceed. In fact, I am proposing an alternative development plan that I believe is stronger and more sustainable. But you and I, We should both have the chance to find genuine happiness. Deepika nodded, a look of determination replacing the sadness in her eyes. My father wants to be pleased, neither will yours. But perhaps it is time we both stopped living solely to please our fathers. She offered her hand, and Ishaan took it gratefully. Their engagement was ending, but a different kind of partnership, one based on mutual respect and honesty, was just beginning. The Diwali fair was in full swing that evening, even more vibrant as the festival approached its climax. Ishaan made his way through the crowds, searching for Nandini's stall. When he finally spotted it, he slowed his steps, his heart pounding. She was there, radiant in a saffron-colored salwar kameez with golden embroidery, serving customers with her usual grace. Her grandmother worked alongside her, and they moved in perfect harmony like dancers performing a well-rehearsed routine. Gathering his courage, Ishaan approached. Nandini. She looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness. Mr. Bajaj, I didn't expect to see you again. I owe you an apology, he said simply, for not being completely honest about my family's business interests, and for leaving so abruptly yesterday. Nandini handed a package to a customer before responding. You don't owe me anything. We barely know each other. That is not true, Ishaan countered gently. I've learned more about myself in the hours we've spent together than in years of board meetings and social functions. You have shown me a world beyond balance sheets and profit margins, a world of community, tradition, and authentic connection. Her expression softened slightly, but caution remained in her eyes. Why are you here, Ishaan? To show you something. He produced a folder from his satchel. My alternative proposal for developing this area, one that preserves the market, upgrades the infrastructure, and ensures that families like yours can continue their traditions for generations to come. Nandini stared at him in disbelief. You changed the development plan? I am trying to. My father is reviewing it now. I can't promise it will be accepted, but I'm fighting for it. For this place, for... He hesitated, then finished honestly. For you. Her grandmother, who had been pretending not to listen, gave up the pretense entirely. Let me see that, she said, taking the folder from Ishaan and adjusting her glasses. She flipped through the pages with Nandini looking over her shoulder. You would preserve the temple square? Nandini asked, pointing to the designs. Yes, it is the heart of the community. The market would wrap around it with improved facilities but maintaining its character, modern amenities but traditional aesthetics. And our stall would remain exactly where it's been for 3 generations, Ishaan assured her. Nandini's grandmother looked up from the plans, her wise eyes studying Ishaan. You've caused quite a stir, young man, standing against your own family's interests. Not against their true interests, Ishaan corrected respectfully. A business that destroys communities ultimately destroys itself. I believe this plan serves everyone better, the vendors, the residents, and yes, even the investors. The older woman nodded, a smile creeping across her face. Nandini, I think I can manage the stall alone for a while. Why don't you take a break and discuss these plans properly with Mr. Bajaj? Nandini hesitated, then removed her apron. Just for a little while, Nani. As they walked through the fair, Ishaan explained the events of the day, his research into the market's history, his confrontation with his father, and his broken engagement. You ended your engagement? Nandini stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Ishaan, I never meant to. It was not just because of you, he assured her. Meeting you opened my eyes, yes. But the truth is, Deepika and I were never truly in love. We were fulfilling our family's expectations without questioning if it was right for us. They continued walking, finding a quiet spot near the temple steps where they could talk more privately. The evening air was filled with the scent of incense and marigolds, while the sounds of the fair created a gentle backdrop to their conversation. Even if your plan is accepted, Nandini said cautiously, it doesn't change the fact that we come from different worlds. Different, yes, but not incompatible, Ishaan replied. I've spent my life in boardrooms and luxury hotels, while you've built a community here. Perhaps what we both need is to learn from each other. And what about Vikram and the politicians behind M&S Holdings? They want to simply accept this new plan. I am prepared for that fight, Ishaan said firmly. In fact, I'd have already started. This morning I met with several journalists who are very interested in the connections between M&S Holdings, certain politicians, and the intimidation tactics being used against vendors in this market. Nandini's eyes widened. You did that? Transparency is a powerful weapon against corruption. Once the public knows what's happening, it becomes much harder for them to continue. As they talked, the temple bells began to ring, calling devotees for the evening aarti. Worshippers streamed past them, carrying offerings of flowers and sweets. Will you stay for the ceremony? Nandini asked. Ishaan nodded. I'd be honored. Together they joined the temple gathering. The rhythmic chanting, the waving of oil lamps, the sense of community and devotion. It all washed over Ishaan like a cleansing wave. Standing beside Nandini, watching the light of the sacred flames reflect in her eyes, he felt a certainty settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, this was where he was meant to be. After the ceremony, as they walked back toward her stall, a commotion near the entrance to the fair caught their attention. A crowd had gathered, voices raised in anger and alarm. Something's wrong, Nandini said, quickening her pace. They pushed through the gathering to find Vikram and several of his men confronting a group of vendors. But unlike previous encounters, the vendors weren't backing down. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces set in determination. What is happening? Nandini asked one of the bystanders. Vikram tried to set fire to old Patel's fabric stall, the man explained urgently. But people saw him this time. Someone recorded it on their phone. The police are coming. Real police, not the corrupt inspectors he usually deals with. Vikram caught sight of Nandini and Ishaan, his face contorting with rage. You! He snarled, lunging toward them. This is your doing. Several vendors moved to intercept him, but Vikram was quick. He reached Nandini, grabbing her arm roughly. You think you've won? This is just the beginning. His threat was cut short as Ishaan stepped forward, breaking Vikram's grip on Nandini with a swift, precise movement. It is over, Vikram. The intimidation, the threats, all of it ends tonight. Vikram sneered. Big words from a rich boy playing hero. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Silas, neither do you, Ishaan replied calmly. The journalists I met with this morning are very interested in your connections to certain politicians and developers. They'll be publishing their findings tomorrow, including evidence of your involvement in multiple incidents of vandalism and intimidation. The color drained from Vikram's face. You rebluffing. Am I? Ishaan pulled out his phone, showing Vikram a preview of the next day's news article. And your employers are already distancing themselves from you. No one wants to be associated with a thug when the spotlight turns on them. The wail of police sirens grew closer. Vikram looked around frantically, his men already melting away into the crowd, abandoning him. The moment of his defeat was written clearly on his face. As the police arrived and took statements from witnesses, the atmosphere in the market transformed. What had been fear and resignation was now replaced by hope and solidarity. Vendors who had been considering selling their properties now spoke of renovation and renewal instead. Later that night, after the excitement had died down, Ishaan and Nandini sat at her sweet stall sharing a plate of jalebis, the very treat that had brought them together. I still cannot believe how quickly everything changed, Nandini marveled. This morning, we were facing destruction. Tonight is just the beginning, Ishaan said. The real work starts tomorrow, convincing my father, dealing with M&S Holdings and their political allies, redesigning the development plan. Do you think we can win? Ishaan took her hand, his heart full. I think together we're unstoppable. Nandini smiled, squeezing his hand in return. Together, she agreed. 3 years later, the transformed market was the jewel of East Mumbai, a vibrant blend of tradition and modernity that had become a model for sustainable urban development across India. The old stalls had been preserved but upgraded with better facilities. The temple square remained the heart of the community, now enhanced with gardens and performance spaces where cultural programs were regularly held. Nandini's sweet stall had expanded into a proper shop, though she insisted on maintaining the original counter where generations of her family had served customers. Behind the shop stood the culinary school she had dreamed of founding, a place where traditional recipes and cooking techniques were taught and preserved. Ishaan had faced significant challenges within his family's company. His father had initially resisted the alternative development plan, but public opinion and the negative press surrounding M&S Holdings' tactics had eventually forced a change of course. The new approach had proved so successful that Bajaj Industries now specialized in heritage-preserving development projects across the country. On this particular evening, as Diwali once again transformed the city into a festival of lights, Ishaan made his way through the bustling market. Vendors greeted him warmly, no longer as an outsider or a threat, but as a friend and advocate. He stopped to chat with several of them, inquiring about their families and businesses with genuine interest. When he reached Nandini's shop, he found her teaching a group of students how to make the perfect jalebi, the very sweet that had first brought them together. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she quickly handed the demonstration over to her assistant. "You're early," she said, wiping her hands on her apron before embracing him. "I couldn't wait," Ishaan admitted, producing a small box wrapped in silk. "Happy Diwali, my love." Nandini unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a jalebi, a whimsical, elegant design that made her laugh with delight. "It is perfect," she said, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. "Just like the woman wearing it," Ishaan replied, his voice soft with emotion. They walked together to the temple square, where preparations for the evening's celebration were underway. Nandini's grandmother, now the respected head of the market committee, directed volunteers in hanging lanterns and arranging flowers. "Ah, there you are," the older woman called when she spotted them. "Come, come. Everything is almost ready." The celebration that night was magnificent, a perfect blend of tradition and innovation, just like the market itself. Families gathered to light diyas and share sweets. Children ran with sparklers, their laughter echoing through the square. Musicians played both classical ragas and contemporary Bollywood hits. As the evening progressed, Ishaan found himself standing beside Deepika, who had indeed pursued her passion for filmmaking. She was documenting the market's transformation for a documentary series on urban heritage. "Your vision became reality," she said, gesturing around them. "You must be proud." "It was never just my vision," Ishaan replied, watching as Nandini distributed sweets to a group of children. "It belonged to everyone here. I just helped give it a voice." Deepika smiled knowingly, "And found your heart in the process." Later, as the moon rose high above the temple dome, Ishaan and Nandini found a quiet moment together, on the steps where they had once sat discussing their different worlds. Now those worlds had merged into something greater than either could have imagined alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Nandini asked softly. "Giving up the easy path, standing against your father, risking everything?" Ishaan looked at the woman who had transformed his life, not by changing him, but by showing him who he truly was. "Not for a single moment," he answered. "Some things are beyond price, remember. Some things you protect, not because they re-valuable, but because they re-yours." Nandini smiled, recognizing her own words from long ago. "I remember. You taught me that the sweetest things in life aren't the easiest to obtain. They require effort, courage, and sometimes sacrifice. But the reward," he took her hand, bringing it to his lips, "is beyond measure." Around them, the Diwali lights twinkled like stars brought down to earth, illuminating not just the market square, but the path they had chosen together. A path of integrity, community, and love that would continue to guide them through whatever challenges the future might hold. In that moment, surrounded by the fruits of their shared vision and the community they had helped preserve, Ishaan and Nandini understood a truth as old as India itself, that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we protect and nurture, not in the power we wield, but in the lives we touch, and that the most precious traditions are those that remind us of our humanity and connect us to one another. It was a lesson written in sweetness and light, preserved like the perfect jalebi, a golden circle with no beginning and no end. Thank you for watching this heart-stirring story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the story. Also, click on the video appearing on your screen to continue the journey with us. See you in the next story.